The night was quiet. The streets of the alien city were almost empty, lit only by broken lamps and the soft glow of distant signs. A human traveler walked carefully, his boots echoing against the stone road. He was far from home, on a planet where humans were not welcome. But he had no choice. Work had brought him here, and curiosity always pushed him to walk where others said not to go. As he turned a corner, he felt the air shift. Something was wrong. The silence was too heavy, like the whole street was holding its breath. He slowed his steps, scanning the shadows between the buildings. Then, from the darkness, a small figure stumbled forward. It was a child, thin, pale, and trembling. The child's clothes were torn, his alien skin dull and bruised. His large black eyes shimmered in the faint light. But what caught the human's attention most was the sharp glint in the child's shaking hands. A knife. The human froze. The child raised the blade, though his grip was weak. His arms trembled. His knees bent as if he could collapse at any second. The knife's point wavered in the air, aimed at the man's chest. For a moment, time stopped. The human's heart beat faster, but he didn't move. He had faced many dangers before. Angry soldiers, greedy smugglers, even wild alien beasts. But this was different. This was just a child. The boy's lips moved. His voice cracked as he tried to speak. Stay away. His words were broken, his accent heavy, but the meaning was clear. He was afraid, terrified. The human raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. Easy, he said softly. I won't hurt you. The child's eyes flickered, torn between fear and exhaustion. His hands shook harder. The knife dipped, then rose again as if his body wanted to fight, but his strength was almost gone. Then suddenly the boy's chest heaved. His eyes filled with tears. His whole body gave up at once. The knife slipped from his fingers, clattering against the hard ground. The sound echoed in the empty street. The child collapsed. He fell to his knees first, then forward onto the stone, sobbing into his arms. His thin shoulders shook with every cry. The human stepped forward, still cautious but unable to ignore the scene. He crouched near the child, keeping his voice gentle. Hey, it's okay. You're safe now, but the child did not answer. He just cried, weak and broken. The sound was not the cry of a fighter, not even of someone dangerous. It was the sound of someone who had lost too much, someone at the end of his strength. The human looked around. No one else was there. No guards, no family, no friends. Just one desperate alien boy, small and starving, trying to scare away the world with a knife he could barely hold. The traveler's chest tightened. He thought of his own past, of times when he too had felt alone. He remembered cold nights with no shelter, days when his stomach burned with hunger. The pain was different, but the feeling was the same. Slowly, he reached down and picked up the knife. It was dull, old, not even sharp enough to cut through strong cloth. This was not a weapon for attack, it was a weapon for survival, a bluff to keep others away. The man slipped it into his pocket, then gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. The alien flinched at the touch but did not pull away. His sobs grew softer, though his body still trembled. Why are you alone? The human whispered, more to himself than to the child. He looked around once more. The street remained silent. The night gave no answers. The boy finally lifted his head. His face was streaked with tears, his lips trembling. He tried to speak again, but his words were broken by sobs. I didn't want to hurt. His voice faded and he buried his face once more. The human stayed with him, not moving, not forcing. He knew trust was fragile, and this moment was heavier than it looked. Something deeper was hidden behind the tears of this child. Minutes passed. The boy's sobs turned to quiet sniffles. He sat back on his knees, wiping his eyes with dirty sleeves. His breathing was uneven, but at least he was calmer. The human reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of bread. He broke it in half, placing one piece in the boy's hands. The alien hesitated, staring at it as if it were a trick. But hunger was stronger than fear. Slowly, with shaking fingers, he brought the bread to his mouth. He bit down, chewing weakly, his eyes still locked on the human. In that silent street, something changed. The knife no longer mattered. The fear was still there, but so was something else, a small spark of trust. The human sat beside him, watching the child eat, and thought, this is not the story they tell about humans. This is something different. Maybe tonight we both learn the truth. The night carried on, but neither of them moved away. The sudden encounter had just begun. The knife lay on the ground, cold and silent, its small blade catching the faint glow of the broken streetlight. The boy's sobs filled the night, echoing against the walls of abandoned houses. His tiny hands covered his face, hiding the shame and fear that burned inside him. The human crouched low, watching him carefully. The first moment of danger was gone, but something heavier had taken its place. This was not an enemy. This was a child who had carried more pain than his small body could hold. The traveler picked up the knife slowly, running his thumb across the blunt edge. It was old, rusted, almost useless. A weapon like this could not win a fight. It could only show desperation. The human slipped it into his pocket, more as a memory of this moment than as protection. He looked at the boy again. The alien child's small shoulders shook as he cried. His ribs showed under his thin shirt, his knees were scraped, and dirt clung to his skin. He looked less like someone who had attacked and more like someone who had already lost. The human spoke softly, his voice steady and calm. "You don't have to be afraid." The boy shook his head. He whispered something, but his voice was so broken that the human leaned closer to hear. Finally, the words came out, weak and trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you." The man's chest tightened at the sound. This was not the voice of a fighter, not even of a thief. This was the voice of someone trapped by hunger, fear, and loneliness. The human sat down beside him, keeping enough distance not to scare him further. "I know," he said gently. "I can see it in your eyes." For a long moment, the boy did not respond. His tears fell quietly, dripping onto the stone street. But slowly, his breathing began to steady. The sobs softened, though his body still trembled. The human reached into his pack again and pulled out a small water flask. He placed it carefully on the ground, sliding it toward the boy. "Drink," he said softly. The child stared at it, wide-eyed, as if unsure whether this was real or a trap. His hands hovered in the air before finally grabbing the flask. He lifted it shakily to his lips, drinking as if every drop mattered. Water ran down his chin, but he kept drinking until the flask was nearly empty. When he lowered it, his eyes were wet again. Not from fear this time, but from relief. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was still weak, but it carried something new. A fragile thread of trust. The human nodded. "You're welcome." Silence fell again, but it was no longer heavy with threat. It was a silence of waiting, of something about to be shared. Finally, the boy looked up at him. His eyes, large and black, reflected the broken light above. "They told me. Humans were monsters," he said, his words slow and broken. "They said, if I ever saw one, I should run or fight, or hide." The man's face hardened, though not in anger at the child. He had heard these words before, whispered in alien markets, written on walls and warning signs. Humans were myths here, feared and hated in equal measure. But this was the first time he had seen that fear in the eyes of a child. "And yet," the man said gently, "here I am. Not hurting you." The boy's lips trembled. He lowered his head again. "I had nothing left. I was so hungry. I thought, maybe if I scare you, maybe I could take something. I didn't want to do it." The human listened in silence. Every word stabbed deeper than the knife ever could. He realized then that this meeting was not just chance. This child was not just a stranger. He was a message, living proof of what fear and lies had done to this galaxy. The man placed the empty flask beside the boy. "I understand," he said. "But listen to me. You don't need to take from me. If you are hungry, I will give. If you are tired, I will help. You don't need the knife anymore." The boy blinked as if unsure whether he had heard correctly. "Why?" he whispered. The man smiled faintly, though there was sadness in his eyes. "Because once long ago I was hungry too, and someone gave me bread. I never forgot." The child's hands tightened around the flask. His tears came again, but this time softer, not sharp with fear. His chest rose and fell as he tried to breathe through the storm of feelings. For the first time, he looked at the human without fear. His small voice broke the night once more. "Then can I stay?" The man was quiet for a long time. He looked down at the boy, at the knife now lying useless in his pocket, and at the stars above the ruined street. He knew the answer already, though it carried danger and weight. "Yes," he said finally. "You can stay." The boy closed his eyes as if that one word was enough to give him strength. He leaned against the human's side, small and fragile, but no longer alone. The knife had fallen, and with it the wall between them. But in the shadows of the street, unseen eyes watched. Whispers spread among the ruins. The galaxy had noticed, and this story was only beginning. The night grew colder. The wind slipped through the broken streets, carrying dust and the faint smell of smoke. The human and the alien boy sat close to the crumbling wall of an abandoned house. For the first time, the boy's breathing was steady, but his eyes still carried the weight of fear. The human reached into his pack again and pulled out a small ration bar. He broke it in half and handed one piece to the boy. The child hesitated, staring at it as if it were some dangerous object. His hands trembled, his black eyes darting between the food and the man's face. "It's safe," the human said softly. "Eat." The boy's stomach growled before he could speak. The sound was loud in the empty street, and he lowered his head in shame. Carefully, he took the food. His fingers were so thin the human could see the bones under his skin. The boy bit into the bar, chewing slowly, as if each bite was both painful and precious. He didn't rush. He didn't gulp. He ate like someone who had learned that food was never enough, that every piece had to last as long as possible. The man watched silently. His chest tightened as he saw the hunger etched into the child's every move. This was not just a hungry moment. This was years of struggle written into how the boy ate. After a few bites, the child stopped. He held the small piece of food in his palm and stared at it. Then slowly, he tried to break it again, dividing it into smaller crumbs. The human frowned. "Why are you doing that?" The boy looked down, his voice a whisper. I have to save some, for later, in case there is no more." The words struck the man like a blade sharper than the knife had ever been. He realized this boy had lived so long in hunger that even now, when food was in his hands, he could not believe it would stay. The traveler reached out and gently pushed the boy's hand back. "Eat all of it," he said firmly, though kindly. "There will be more." The child's eyes widened, filled with disbelief. "More? You will give me more?" The human nodded. "As long as I have food, you won't be hungry." The boy stared at him, unsure whether to trust. Then slowly he finished the bar. When the last crumb was gone, tears welled in his eyes again, not from fear but from relief. For a moment the street was silent, broken only by the faint hum of faraway machines. The human leaned back, resting his head against the wall, but his mind was racing. Why was this child alone? Why had no one helped him? Where were his parents? His people? The questions burned, but he did not ask yet. He knew trust was fragile, and the boy's voice would open only when ready. At last, the boy spoke. His words were slow, broken, but they carried a truth heavier than any silence. "My parents are gone," he whispered. "The soldiers took them. They said humans caused the war. They said humans killed our people. That's why everyone fears you." The man froze. He had heard whispers of this war before, but never through the eyes of a child. Now the truth bled into the night, carried by a trembling voice. "They told us, humans are dangerous," the boy continued, his voice cracking. "But when they were gone, no one gave me food. No one cared. I only had this knife." The child looked away, ashamed, as if holding a knife was a crime. The human reached into his pocket and pulled out the same dull blade. He held it in front of them both. "This?" He shook his head. "This is not a weapon. This is just a piece of metal. You had something stronger." The boy blinked, confused. "Stronger?" "Yes," the human said. "You had the courage to stand even when you were starving. That is stronger than this knife will ever be." For a long moment, the boy just stared at him as if trying to understand words that felt impossible. Then slowly his lips trembled into the smallest smile. It was weak, unsure, but it was real. The human nodded. "Good, you understand now. You are more than hunger. You are more than fear." But even as he said it, he noticed movement in the shadows. A pair of eyes glimmered from behind a broken wall. Then another and another. Silent watchers hidden in the ruins. The boy noticed too. His face paled. "They are watching," he whispered. His small hands clutched the human's sleeve. "They hate humans. If they see me with you, they will call me traitor." The man's eyes narrowed. He stood slowly, placing himself between the boy and the shadows. His voice was calm, but his presence was firm. "Let them watch. Let them whisper. You are not alone anymore." The boy's grip tightened, trembling with both fear and hope. For the first time in his life, he was not only fed but also defended. The hunger had been revealed, but something even stronger had been born: trust. And in the silent ruins, the watchers disappeared back into the night, carrying stories of what they had seen, stories of a human and an alien child, sitting together as if they belonged. The ruined street had grown silent again. The human and the alien child sat close to the wall. the shadows stretching long as the night deepened. The boy's eyes still darted nervously toward the alleys, afraid of the unseen watchers, but the man stayed calm, his presence like a shield. "You don't need to fear," the human said softly. "I am here." The boy lowered his gaze, his voice trembling. "You don't understand. If they see me with you, they will call me a traitor. They will never forgive me." The human leaned closer, his tone gentle. "Then tell me, why did you not run? You could have left me, but you stayed. Why?" The boy's lips parted, but for a moment no sound came. His small hands twisted in his lap. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time not from hunger. These were heavier tears, carved from memory. Finally he whispered, "Because you remind me of him." The man frowned. "Of who?" The boy's voice cracked. "My father." The human stayed quiet, waiting. The boy took a deep breath, as if each word cost him more strength than the last. "My father was kind," the child said slowly. "He did not believe the stories. He said humans were not monsters. He said once, long ago, humans saved his life." The traveler's heart skipped. His mind searched the fragments of history he had heard, stories buried under propaganda and fear. Could it be true? The boy continued, his voice trembling but steady enough now to flow. "When the war came, soldiers filled our streets. They said humans had destroyed whole worlds. They shouted that it was all your fault. My father refused to hate. He said, 'Do not believe everything they tell you.' But for that, they took him." The boy's shoulders shook. He wrapped his arms around himself as though trying to hold in the memory. "They dragged him away. My mother begged. She tried to follow. She never came back. Since that day, I have been alone." The human felt his chest grow tight. The silence of the street now carried a different weight, the truth of a child's grief. The boy looked up at him, tears shining in his eyes. "That's why I picked up the knife. Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because I had nothing left. If I could not scare you away, maybe I could join him. Maybe it would end." The words hit the human harder than any blade. This was no enemy. This was a child broken by lies and war, crushed between fear and loneliness. The man's voice was steady but heavy with emotion. "Listen to me. Your father was right. Humans are not monsters. We bleed, we hurt, and we care just like you. If he believed that, then you must believe it too." The boy wiped his face with his dirty sleeve. "But they all say different. The council, the guards, even the schools. They say humans are shadows that destroy everything they touch." The human leaned closer, his eyes sharp with quiet fire. "Then let me tell you another story. One your council will not teach." The boy blinked, curious despite his fear. "Long ago," the man said, "when the first human ships reached the stars, we did not come as conquerors. We came as explorers. We built, we traded, we learned. Many aliens welcomed us, but others feared us. Fear is powerful. Fear can twist truth into lies. And so stories were made, stories like the ones they fed you." The boy's mouth opened slightly. His small hands gripped the edges of his shirt as if holding on to the words. The man lowered his voice, his tone sharp with warning. "And the ones who spread those lies. They gained power from your fear. They want you to believe humans are shadows, because if you believe, you obey. And if you obey, they control you." The boy's eyes widened. For the first time, the tears stopped. In their place, something new flickered. Not trust, not yet, but the first spark of realization. Then, "My father was taken because he refused to fear," the boy whispered. The man nodded. Yes, he saw the truth. And they silenced him. The boy's breath shook. His body trembled again, but not from hunger. From anger. His small fists clenched. "They lied to us. They made us hate you, so they could rule us." The human placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you understand. The knife you carried was not your weapon. The truth is, that is what they fear most." The boy stared at him, his lips pressed together. His voice was almost too soft to hear. "Then, if I walk with you, I will be carrying my father's fight." The man's gaze hardened, but his voice was calm. "Not his fight, yours." The silence stretched again, but this time it was no longer heavy. It was sharp, alive, filled with something dangerous and new. The boy lifted his head, eyes shining with tears and fire. For the first time, he did not look broken. He looked alive, and far in the distance, the unseen watchers whispered among themselves. They had seen more than a human helping a child. They had seen the birth of something that could shatter their lies. The hidden story was no longer hidden. It had begun to rise. The boy's story still echoed in the man's mind as they sat in silence. The broken walls of the city seemed to lean closer, heavy with secrets. The human traveler could not shake the thought. This child should not be here, starving and alone. He should have been safe, cared for, loved. But instead, he had been given only fear. The boy leaned against him now, tired but awake, his large dark eyes watching the shadows. He whispered, "They will not let this go. If they saw you give me food, they will come." The human's jaw tightened. He knew the child was right. Mercy was never simple in a world ruled by lies. Helping the boy would not just draw suspicion, it would draw danger. And yet, when he looked down at the small figure beside him, trembling but holding on, he knew there was no choice at all. He could walk away now. Leave the boy to his fate, stay safe. That would be the smart choice. The easy choice, but not the human choice. He placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "I told you before, you are not alone anymore. If trouble comes, I will face it with you." The boy's lips parted, shock flickering across his face. "Why? You don't even know me." The man's voice was steady. "Because once someone helped me when they didn't know me. And that kindness kept me alive. Now it is my turn." The boy lowered his head, his voice almost breaking. "But if they see us, they could kill you, or worse." The human smiled faintly, though his eyes carried steel. "Then let them try." At that moment, the silence broke. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the street. Slow, deliberate, heavy. The sound of people who wanted to be heard. The boy froze, his hands gripping the man's sleeve. "It's them," he whispered. His body shook, his voice barely more than air. "The Watchers." The human stood, pulling the boy gently behind him. His eyes narrowed as shadowy figures emerged from the ruined alleys. 3 of them, cloaked, their faces hidden but their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. One of them stepped forward. His voice was sharp, cutting through the night. "Human, you should not be here." The man said nothing. He kept his body between the boy and the strangers. The figure's eyes flicked to the child. "And you. We saw you. You took food from the human. You betrayed your own kind." The boy whimpered, but the man's voice cut through like a blade. "He betrayed nothing. He was hungry. I gave him food. That is not betrayal. That is survival," the cloaked alien hissed. "Humans twist words, always. First you give food, then you take control. That is how your kind spreads." The human's voice grew hard. "And what have you given him? Hunger? Fear? Lies? If you call that protection, then you are the true monsters here." The figures shifted, uneasy. But the leader snarled, "This is not your world, human. You will leave now, and the child stays with us." The boy clutched the man's hand tightly, shaking his head. His voice was desperate. "No, don't let them take me. Please." The traveler looked down at him. In that small face he saw everything: fear, trust, and hope. The hope of someone who had nothing left to believe in except this one moment. And in that instant the human knew. His path was clear. He turned back to the cloaked figures, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "No," he said. "The child comes with me." The alley fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. The words had been spoken and they could not be taken back. The leader's voice dropped low, dangerous. "You choose mercy. Then you also choose war." The man did not flinch. "If mercy is war to you, then yes, I choose it." The figures hissed, but they did not move closer. Instead, they melted back into the shadows, their whispers trailing in the air. "This will not end well for you, human. Nor for the boy." The street grew empty again, but the threat hung heavy in the night. The boy's knees nearly gave out from fear, but the man caught him. "It's all right," he said. "They won't take you." The child buried his face against the man's side, trembling but safe. His voice came out broken. You could have given me to them. You could have saved yourself." The man placed a hand gently on the boy's head. "Mercy is not about saving myself. It's about saving you." The boy's tears returned, but they were not the same as before. They were not just tears of hunger or fear. They were tears of something new, of being chosen, of being protected, of mattering to someone at last. The human looked toward the dark alleys where the figures had disappeared. He knew the danger was not gone. If anything, it had just begun, but he also knew this. Sometimes the most dangerous path was the only one worth walking, and tonight, he had chosen mercy. The street was quiet again, but the silence was no longer safe. It carried the weight of promises made and threats whispered. The boy clung to the human's arm as they moved through the ruins, his steps weak but his grip strong. The man guided him carefully, leading him to the shelter of a broken house. Its roof was gone, but the walls stood strong enough to keep out the wind. They sat together on the cracked floor, the faint glow of the stars shining through the gaps above. For a long time, neither spoke. The human watched the boy as he hugged his knees, his thin frame shaking with cold and fear. He could see it in his eyes. The boy was carrying something heavier than hunger, something he had not said yet. Finally, the man broke the silence. "You are safe now, but I can see there is more you are holding back. Tell me, what is it?" The boy hesitated. His black eyes glistened in the faint starlight. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His small hands pressed tighter around his knees as if afraid that speaking the truth would shatter him. The man placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "I cannot help you unless you trust me, and trust only grows when we share what is real." The boy looked at him then, and for the first time his gaze did not dart away. His lips trembled, but the words began to flow. "I was not just hungry," he whispered. "I was ashamed." The human frowned softly. "Ashamed? Why?" Tears filled the boy's eyes again. "Because before my parents were taken, they told me something, a secret, one that could get me killed." The man leaned closer, his voice calm but firm. "What secret?" The boy shook his head as if speaking it would burn his tongue. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Finally, in a broken whisper, he said, "My father, he was part of a small group who believed humans were not the enemy. They shared stories, hidden stories of times when humans saved lives instead of taking them. They wanted to tell the truth. They wanted the council's lies to end." The boy's voice cracked. "That is why the soldiers came. They didn't take my father for no reason. They took him because he carried the truth. And they knew, if people believed him, their power would fall." The human's heart pounded. The pieces fit too well. A resistance. A hidden truth. Lies used as chains. And now this child was the last fragment of it all. The boy's tears spilled down his cheeks. "My father told me, if anything happens to us, you must remember this. Not all humans are monsters. One day, you will see for yourself." The child looked at the man, his face wet and broken. "And then, I saw you. You gave me food. You protected me. You stood against them, and now, I know he was right." The human felt a deep weight in his chest. This was more than kindness now. This was legacy. This child carried the voice of those who had tried to resist the lies, and now that voice had chosen him. The boy's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with fear and hope. "But there is more. My father left something with me. Something hidden. A message," he said. "I must give it to the one who proves the truth." The man's eyes narrowed. "And you think that one is me?" The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, because when I pointed the knife at you, you did not strike me. When I cried, you did not walk away. When they came, you stood between me and them. You are the proof." His small hands trembled as he reached into his ragged clothes. From beneath his shirt, he pulled out a small broken pendant. It was cracked, old, but it shimmered faintly with strange markings. Alien symbols carved into its surface glowed in the starlight. The boy placed it into the human's hand. "This is my father's last gift. He said it carries the truth. I don't know how, but he told me never to let it fall into the council's hands, only to give it to someone I could trust with my life." The man turned the pendant in his hand. The markings glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. He felt a chill. This was no ordinary relic. It was evidence, proof of the lies told about his kind. Proof that could change everything. The boy's voice cracked again. "Now it is yours. And if they find out I gave it to you, they will kill me." The human placed the pendant safely into his pack, then held the boy's face gently. "Listen to me. No one will harm you. As long as I breathe, you will live, and we will find the truth together." The boy broke into tears once more, but these were different. They were tears of release. For the first time since the war took his parents, he was not carrying the burden alone. He leaned against the human's chest, his voice weak, but certain. "I trust you." The man held him close, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. He knew this confession had changed everything. He was no longer just protecting a child. He was protecting the last voice of a buried truth, and the key to a storm that could shake the galaxy. And in the shadows, far away, the watchers whispered again, "The boy has spoken." The broken house was silent, but inside its crumbling walls something powerful had happened. The boy had confessed the secret. The pendant was now safe in the human's pack, and for the first time, trust had replaced fear. But the night was not over. The boy stirred, his tired voice breaking the silence. What will we do now? They will come again. They will never stop. The human looked down at him, his eyes steady. Then we will not stop either. We carry something bigger than fear now. We carry truth. The boy touched his chest where the pendant had once rested. For a moment he felt empty without it. But then he looked at the man and realized the truth was no longer just a hidden relic. It was alive and in both of them. The human stood adjusting his pack. The pendant pulsed faintly, as though alive, as though it knew its time had come. He offered his hand to the boy. Come with me. The boy hesitated, his small body trembling. If I walk with you, I will never be able to go back. The man's voice was firm. Back to what? Hunger? Lies? Fear? You deserve more than that. Your father wanted more for you, and I will not let his wish die. The boy's black eyes glistened. He reached out and placed his fragile hand in the human's. For the first time it felt strong, as though holding on meant he could face anything. They stepped out into the street. The stars above stretched like an endless ocean, cold and vast. But this night was different. For the boy, the stars no longer looked like distant fires. They looked like paths waiting to be walked. As they moved, the man stopped suddenly. He bent down, picking something off the ground. The dull, rusted knife. The boy froze. His chest tightened. I don't need it anymore. The man studied the blade, then looked at him. No, you don't. He placed the knife gently in the boy's hands. But you must choose what to do with it. The boy stared at the weapon. It had once been his shield, his only hope of surviving another day. Now it was nothing but a piece of metal. Slowly his fingers loosened. His hand opened and the knife fell with a soft clatter onto the stone street. The sound echoed louder than any scream. It was the sound of chains breaking. The boy lifted his chin, his voice small but strong. I choose trust. The human nodded, pride glinting in his eyes. Good. Then from this moment you walk forward. No more fear. They turned and began moving through the ruins. Behind them the knife remained in the dirt, forgotten. But above them unseen watchers stirred again. Hidden eyes followed their steps, whispering words that carried far. The boy walks with a human. The old lies will not hold. Change is coming. The man felt the weight of those whispers. He knew the council would hear. He knew soldiers would be sent. But he also knew something greater. Fear had been broken tonight. Not only in the boy, but in the hearts of those who had watched. They reached the edge of the ruined district where the open road stretched into the unknown. The boy hesitated again, his small voice trembling. Where will we go? The man looked toward the horizon, where faint lights of distant cities flickered. Anywhere they tell us not to go. Anywhere the truth is buried. And together we will bring it into the light. The boy's lips curved into the smallest smile, fragile but real. He tightened his grip on the man's hand. Then I'm ready. The human gave a short nod. Good, because this is only the beginning. They walked into the night, shadows stretching long behind them. The pendant pulsed faintly in the man's pack like a heart waiting to beat louder. The boy no longer trembled. His steps were small, but they carried the weight of something bigger than both of them. The story of a starving alien child and the human who chose mercy would spread. The lies of the council would shake. The galaxy would whisper, then question, then rise. And somewhere in the silence of the stars, destiny shifted. The future had begun.